Okay, so I'm Michael Dunaway. I direct a research institute at University of Louisiana in Lafayette in emergency management and homeland security. I'm also the chair of the public safety supercluster and work with now two other co-chairs, and I've got information on them at the end here. We have, over the last year or so, we've consolidated some direction on a number, probably about 50% of these represented cities. Now, these are the cities that are listed as team members in the public safety supercluster. We now have 33. And those cities, of course, as you all know in your Portland experience here and elsewhere, they represent cities, universities, research institutions, public sector organizations, nonprofits. I mean, it's a whole spectrum. So there are a lot of people involved in each of these. I'm very pleased to say that this year at this conference, as a matter of fact, that we've added 3 new ones, and they're international, 2 from Singapore and 1 from New Zealand. So we're planning future conferences in both your cities, by the way, at some point. We will look forward to doing that. And this really rounds out the capacity, but also the portfolio of the research we're doing. I did not list the technology development projects that are here, but they range in everything from the use of unmanned aerial vehicles in post-disaster surveillance, to water management and flood monitoring, to environmental and health monitoring, and then to disaster preparedness with first responders working alongside public sector entities. It's a full spectrum of work that is being done here, so there's a lot going on. I wanted to point out that the plan for this year, and this refers to a comment that Scott Tousley made earlier today, we had originally been thinking about a conference in mid-August that we were hoping to hold in Chicago. Problem is, I've learned 2 things. One, you can't plan anything in midsummer with less than 6 months planning cycle. But the more interesting issue, the more important issue is that what we intend to do is to push a much bigger agenda on this, to look across the public safety supercluster and look at an organizational structure. That's our last goal there, but also to update this blueprint that each one of the superclusters has crafted. We want to include an annex in the existing supercluster, the public safety supercluster blueprint, to encompass cybersecurity, and then also a template for cities to follow to actually implement this blueprint in public safety, and that's a big goal. So we're going to actually do more work on this. We're planning for a conference now in Washington, D.C. It'll be in October, probably, somewhere in October, mid-year or mid-fall. And the goal will be to bring together as many supercluster members as we can, action cluster members as we can, along with the executive team, and hopefully with some city and sponsorship at the federal level, which we are able to gain in Washington a lot easier than we can in other places. One of the reasons for moving this conference is that we're actually initiating a collaboration with the Open Geospatial Consortium. And OGC is an international consortium organization that has been chartered, I think it's by DHS, to develop what they are calling the Smart City Interoperability Reference Architecture. And this is not simply a technology architecture. This is actually a very broad strategy to how to look at interoperability involving public safety and all other dimensions, transportation, health, welfare, across an entire city. And OGC is developing this. As you might imagine, Open Geospatial Consortium works heavily in the GIS field. So they're looking at how to map this reference architecture so that it can actually be used to envision at a local level or at a community level what that architecture should look like across all the superclusters themselves. We're collaborating with them. We're going to co-locate our conference in the fall with a piece of the work that they are doing. And then ultimately we're going to do some pilot tests within the public safety side of our work. We'll form the pilot tests to test this reference architecture. And that'll probably be sometime in the early spring of next year. I wanted to make a brief mention about the cybersecurity dimension that we're looking at here. In public safety, this is a big issue for us. It's also a big issue for every one of the superclusters. And we hope to consolidate sort of an effort across all of the superclusters. We took a stab at trying to boil cybersecurity down to the absolute fundamentals. And we looked at this last February in a meeting in the conference we had in Washington. And it came down to trust. This was also, I think, the very first line in Scott Tousley's DHS briefing that he showed just a little bit. The thing that's interesting in the cybersecurity realm is that it's trust on the technology side, but it gets to the larger issue of trustworthiness and trust and credibility for organizations that are working in public safety, whether they're first responders, local government, private sector, or public sector security firms. Trust is the coin of the realm for both public safety and for cybersecurity and technology applications. And when you boil it all down, it comes down to that. So the issue that really touches on this is how do we design trustworthy systems that reinforce the trust we feel in public agencies and private sector agencies that act on our behalf to secure a community. So that's the kind of nexus of the whole thing. That's the starting point for our discussion. That's where we're going with this, and we'll be working in that area in the future. These are our points of contact. Dean Skidmore, who's a private company owner, and then Ed Davalos are my two co-chairs. Ed works with Motorola Solutions. So we got a small private business owner on one hand, and we got Motorola on the other hand as the co-chairs for this organization, and I run a research university at the university. So it's a well-rounded path. The team looks like this across the board, and we would really be interested to have you all join us and think about what you do as having some dimension of public safety, whatever sector it may be in. And I look forward to meeting particularly with our 3 new members at some point during the next 2 days. Thank you all very much.